Alright, so here's what I got going on. I do a lot of scuba diving in New Jersey and off the coast of New Jersey, and we have a couple of artifacts that we can get to the surface with lift bags, but we've been having trouble getting back to port. They're a little bit too heavy to be lifting in with like a crane, and I came up with an idea of a semi-submersible barge that we could, once the artifact is on the surface, we could flood the tanks to make it negatively buoyant and sink and get it below the artifact, and then pump out the ballast tanks with air so that it would then again float, thus picking up the artifact on top and being able to tow the barge back to port. So what I came up with was a two-piece barge that would get brought out to the site, and once we were out there they could be put in the water, bolted together, and used to pick up the artifacts. This one is going to end up being about 8.5 feet by 11.5 feet. It's mostly out of pressure treated lumber that I got from Home Depot. All of it has pretty much been culled lumber, which usually gets marked down to about 70% off. The drums I was able to find on eBay, and I was able to pick them up. A guy was selling them. I got them for $9 a piece, which is a pretty good price. Usually you see them about $15 to $20 a piece. This is the one half that I've already put together, and I started working on the next half, which I'll show some more of the breakdown. The sides are 2x10. They started out as 16 footers, and like I said, they were marked down 70% off, so I got them for about $8 a piece. I did put a 45-degree angle on the front. Most of the dock itself should actually be out of the water when it's floating, but I just thought that in case, some waves, I did put a 45. I also made some diverters out of some extra plastic drums that I had, and I made a template which I cut, and I was able to make some kind of rounded noses for the front so that it'll tow a little bit better. In order to keep the weight down, I kind of spaced out the 2x4s for the deck a little bit more. Most of them have about an 8-inch separation on them. Toward the back, I kind of changed it up a little. I need to add one more board there, but I made it more about 5 inches apart. I might add some more on these front drums just to help keep the drums locked in place, because all the buoyancy is going to want to push up. I plumbed everything together with PEX. I used the original bung adapters. There's a buttress, 2-inch buttress adapter, which is a coarse thread, and then on the bottom is a 2-inch NPT thread, which is a fine thread. And I knocked out the center pieces, which is 3/4 inch NPT, and I used a male adapter to thread into there. I had to use a lot of Teflon tape and dope because for some reason one of them didn't seem like it wanted to seal up real well. I don't know if it was just because it was plastic threads on plastic threads, but I ran 3/4 inch PEX off of each drum to a T, and then I brought that back and I plumbed it into a manifold, and then the seams coming off of the back drums. A little harder to see because it's under the board, but I also have another one coming to a T and coming forward. So essentially, this manifold is going to help both vent the air out when I'm trying to flood the tanks, as well as pump the air back in. So my game plan is, when we're on site and we're ready to sink it, is to remove these caps, which would allow the water in, except you would need, at a certain point, the air would have to get removed. So I'm going to vent both ball valves to allow air to come out of the top while water is coming in from the bottom. And that should allow it to get a little more negative. Now the wood itself will float, so I'm going to have to add a little bit of weight, maybe some cinder blocks or something to help get it down below, because the pressure treated wood will have some buoyancy to it. And I probably won't be able to get 100% of the air out of the barrels, so I'll have to overcome that buoyancy as well. But I think that's a reasonable amount. And then once it comes time to float it, I'll add a compressor line from the boat to the manifold there, and I'm going to open the ball valves, which should pump air into the top forcing the water out of the bottom hole, and once all the water is out and the air's coming out of the bottom hole, I can put the caps back on and hopefully tow the artifact back to port. I also have some diverters on the back barrels also, and I even cut a little angle back here just in case, just with the way the design was. I also have another angled boards with two more diverters back here. Here's a little video of the framework for the second part of the barge. I actually have it sitting on top the first barge, and one of the barrels is just kind of sitting in place here, and you can kind of see what I did. So I put some 2x10 blocking in between the front. Like I said, the front has been cut on a 45-degree angle. I used some 4-inch, I believe they were 4.5-inch maybe, like pressure treated lag bolts. I did use some shorter ones to toenail this side in here. I think they were 2 7/8. Moving backwards, I added some blocking that's going to support the 45-degree wood that's going to be in there. Just some 2x6s to kind of help just give a little more strength in the middle. Some of that stuff's bolted in on the sides. I did use Gorilla Glue on all the joints, so you do see some squeeze out of the foam from where I glued and screwed all the ends. And I have one of the barrels in place now. And I made some diverters out of some of the barrel. And I came up with this flat balance. You can kind of see what it looks like. So I kind of came up with a couple different designs. There was a guy on a video who made one, and I started trying to do that with one of mine, and I just couldn't get it to work out. And you can actually see where the ones on the lower one are bolted in there. And what I did was, this is going to get stuck on here. I'm going to bolt that piece flat. I'm going to bolt it across, and then once that's bolted, I can tuck the corners in, and then that's going to get bolted to the sides, and it's going to make a nice little cone that's going to hopefully divert the water over top of the barrel and make it tow a little easier. So you can see I can kind of got the curve of it started there. I put a couple screws in just to kind of tack it in place, and then I came back with some 1/4-inch by 1.5 lag screws with washers galvanized, and I finished fastening it down just to give it some extra strength. And then what I was doing was kind of pressing this in until I got the right angle so that it kind of mimics the shape of the barrel there. You can kind of see it from straight on. And when I do that, I just make a mark down on the side here. I'm going to add a new mark where it lines up with the wood, and then I'll just bolt it, put 2 bolts in on the side there to hold it in place. So here I have it clamped. I drew that line with Sharpie, the one that's the lower line that's even with the wood. The other line was just a reference line that I used when I was cutting the template. I came around and I threw 2 more bolts on the inside to help hold that there. I can take that off. Move around to the other side. I have a second reference line, which is right there. And I'll clamp that off and bolt that one on too, and do the same thing for the other 3 diverters. Now that other side's bolted in. Once the drum gets mounted in place, and I'm assuming that once there's a little bit of pressure on from the water pushing on it, that should make a pretty nice little cone to help taper this approach angle of the drum. Hopefully it'll tow a little bit better.